Welcome to Beyond the Mask. Today's guest is someone who never shies away from the tough truths and personal insights, and no stranger to this podcast, Dr. Randy Moore. He is the voice behind the increasingly influential Substack Chainsawed. In his recent post titled, "No One is Coming to Save Us," Randy lays bare a reality many don't want to admit. The infighting between the AANA and ASA isn't just frustrating, it's dangerous. While we bicker over turf, payers, and policymakers, they're reshaping the anesthesia landscape without us. Randy argues that our divided front has made us vulnerable economically, politically, and strategically. He calls for nothing short of a reckoning, a new path forward built on shared interest and real collaboration. This episode is not about finger pointing. It's about asking the hard question. What will it take for our profession to survive and even thrive in this rapidly changing environment?
CRNA Financial Planning is a sponsor of Beyond the Mask podcast, investment advice offered through Private Advisor Group. Nothing in this podcast should be construed as investment advice. Plus, did you know listening to our podcast can earn you Class B credits? For details on how to submit, visit the CE credit section at beyondthemaskpodcast.com. Welcome to Beyond the Mask, innovation and opportunities for CRNAs and advanced practice nurses, with certified financial planner Jeremy Stanley and CRNA Sharon Pierce. Jeremy Stanley has worked with CRNAs for more than 23 years, and Sharon Pierce is a former president of the AANA and the NCANA. Join us as we leave the operating room and learn the latest in the CRNA and advanced practice nurse industries. Beyond the Mask starts in 10, 9, 8, 7.
And today I have a special co-host guesting with me, Kevin. So tell our listeners a little bit about you.
I'm Kevin. I just graduated CRNA school. I just have to
When
take
did
my
you
boards.
graduate?
I graduated a few days ago.
Oh, congratulations.
So, I'm delaying my boards to be here with you, Sharon.
Yeah.
But I'm a host on Grade 1 View for a few more months, and now I get to kind of step up and be on your show, and I'm excited to be here.
Yes, we are happy to have you here, and congratulations
Thank you.
on achieving what you have. And so you are really in for it, because our first guest is quite an, entertainer.
Entertainer,
He's brilliant, no less, and he served on my board when I was AANA president, and I knew that he was a star was being born.
Wow. Well, thank you.
Whenever he came on the board, and whenever we're not taping, I'll tell you the real story,
Please
how
do.
I figured it out. So welcome, Randy.
Thank you for having me. Now that you've set expectations a little too high for all of us.
Well, I find that you are a highly evolved man. And what I mean by that is I've watched you over the years, and it's been, I went out of office as president 10 years ago this year, and you came on my board before then. So a dozen years? And to watch your transitioning, and most men are not really self-aware. I mean, I don't mean that in an ugly way.
Yes.
It just is. But I find you intensely self-aware and able to admit, hey, listen, that was probably not my best move, my best work. And then I watch you regroup from that and go forward with a new perspective.
Well, thank you. Wow.
Will your wife agree?
No.
Okay, so I didn't think so. But as an outsider who has watched you grow over the last dozen years, that's the world according to Sharon Pierce, for whatever that's worth.
Well, thank you very much. I have a heuristic that if I'm not slightly embarrassed by who I was 3 years ago, then I'm probably not growing or evolving. So.
I like that.
Yeah, so it's always a work in progress. I definitely make mistakes. I have still a ton to learn. So about leadership, management, the anesthesia business, all of that. And
your home life is always interesting too.
Yes.
With your daughters. What was it when they were throwing poop at each other or something?
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was to clarify, it wasn't their own. It was dog.
Okay.
It was a tough day.
in the Moore household.
There was a disagreement, and then they started weaponizing dog poo at each other. So,
I know you younger kids are not into Facebook necessarily,
I'm
but
on there.
it's pretty fun. So anyway, now that we've dispensed with that, let's talk about your Substack itself and what that is for some people who may not understand what Substack is.
Yeah, it's a newsletter that I write either weekly or bi-weekly, depending on what mood I'm in. And the idea was that I wanted to start to develop some thought leadership and to build a community around some of the things that were really interesting to me. So, and a lot of this is stuff that I do, in my job around, building out leadership, thinking about the anesthesia business ecosystem in a really serious way. I think there is a lot of conversation. There's a lot of business of anesthesia conversation, but I think having a perspective from someone who is on the executive team of a large and growing anesthesia platform, I thought there might be an audience. And I know it's a niche audience, but it's been fun. So a lot of trial and error, writing articles that honestly, I'm writing to myself 5 years ago. So this is the stuff I wish I knew.
Oh.
And so, helping understand what's happening from a macro perspective around anesthesia, what things are going to look like in the future. And then, another kind of vein of content is around leadership. And this is the stuff that I do and teach at North Star with my leaders. And I have a sense there's a audience for that as well.
Well, every time, how many times have you already gotten my call saying, "Oh my God, this is amazing stuff. We need to talk about this."
Oh, well, it's good to be back.
Yeah.
Looking forward to this. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
So why don't you go ahead and jump in and let's talk about this particular article that warranted my call to you this time.
So if we zoomed out a little bit and think about healthcare, but let's talk about anesthesia specifically.
Yeah.
So this is the United States of America. What largely shapes healthcare delivery is reimbursement. So if we think about some of the challenges that we've had, over the preceding years, and this is not necessarily a new phenomenon, but it's definitely one that is developing and accelerating in the wrong direction for us. So the idea here is that practice models follow economics when it comes to anesthesia. So as you think about whether you put a model that's medically directed or maybe a loose collaboration model, which is you're likely using QZ to bill. Mm-hmm. I know this is inside baseball, so I'll zoom out in a second. But then there is the independent CRNA model, which is obviously you're using QZ billing. We've seen an explosion of these models over the last 5 to 7 years, right? So we've seen all physician groups bring in CRNAs for anesthesia care team. We've seen groups that were physician and CRNA going to all CRNA. So the rate limiting step here is the reimbursement. And so as you look at what's happened over the, call it, last 3 years or so, we're seeing, at least I'm seeing, a very significant risk to reimbursement for CRNAs. And that's the stuff that started. It actually didn't start with Cigna because we've seen this before. Like, in Alabama, for example, Blue Cross Blue Shield was reimbursing CRNAs less, and it's not necessarily isolated. But what's happened over the 3 years is seismic in terms of the attack on CRNA reimbursement. And as I look at this, it's a particularly difficult problem because the two organizations that are best positioned to fight this are, you would think, without understanding the weird anesthesia world we're in, would be, there's a Venn diagram and there's significant overlap on these issues, especially economic issues. And as you look at this stuff, you can see there's zero collaboration. No. and it's because they are distracted from a tribal perspective on other issues. Meanwhile, the economics are playing out in a way that's disadvantaging both CRNAs and anesthesiologists. And so I think that's kind of the onus, which is like, hey, there's a lot of stuff we can fight about. We should probably fight about it over time, but the wolf is at the door. Mm-hmm. Are we going to get serious about protecting the profession in a serious and strategic way?
It's really interesting. I mean, so when you look at it from the CRNA perspective, you obviously see these cuts affecting us, correct? Mm. And you're saying the physician anesthesiologist side should, I don't know if you're saying to come together, correct?
100%.
From their side, what are they losing from those reimbursement cuts as well?
Well, a good number, and this is where the ASA is internally conflicted in a way that is particularly interesting. I mean, a good number of ASA members employ CRNAs.
Yeah.
And some subset of those are using QZ billing because it makes sense at, the facilities that they're managing. So the problem is, internally from an ASA political perspective, as they look at this problem, it's hard for them to be out front on this because they we should pay CRNAs less.
Yeah, I think that's their big argument.
Yeah, but there's a meaningful segment of their membership. They're like, well, hang on, actually, this is not good for us, and it's not good for the profession because we employ CRNAs, and this is going to force us to have to evaluate other options. The other piece of this is, and this United Healthcare example is a recent one. They just didn't go after QZ billing. They went after physician or physical status modifiers. So it's not necessarily just focused exclusively on CRNAs, but United Healthcare is very smart. I mean, they've made a calculated decision that hey, the anesthesia community is fragmented, they're disorganized, and they're strategically undisciplined. And so we're going to be able to divide and conquer them, in which they've been successful in doing that, not just United Healthcare, but you look at what's happened this started really with Cigna in 2013, in March 2013, where they looked around and said, hey, we're going to decrease CRNA reimbursement by 15%. And let's see what happens.
So are we crafting our argument wrong?
I think we are. I've gotten myself in trouble with this article. So we can unpack that. So this article is the one I've gotten the most page views and comments and text messages and Facebook messages on.
I've read quite some of the comments.
Yeah, a lot.
Anesthesiologists.
It was on Reddit too. Yeah. I was like, this is a little mean.
Yeah. I haven't seen the Reddit, but
I'll try to find it for you.
Yeah, send it along for sure. So, and I know I can tell by the traffic sources that they're coming from Reddit, they're coming from the ASA community, they're coming from obviously from the CRNA community. And so I've hit something that is either resonating or pissing off people.
The same. It could be all
My
in one,
sense is,
man.
if I were to categorize, like 80% of people are like, okay, this is interesting. I think you're hitting on something, and 15 to 20% are like, you're an idiot, or you are betraying the organization by by telling everybody that our baby is ugly. And so I think that's how it's playing out, with the anesthesia community. But the level of interest indicates that I probably have struck a nerve that needed to be messed with. So
it's always, radical this side, radical that side, and then they kind of look down on the people who are like, let's kind of come together with this. Do you kind of feel that with this too?
Well, yeah. I mean, to really get into a can of worms, it's the core issue with that is the political infrastructure of both organizations, and I mean both of organizations are designed in a certain way where kind of the extreme people are the ones that move up into leadership.
Yeah.
So ballpark, 75 to 80% of practicing anesthesiologists and CRNAs don't care, aren't engaged, just want to make sure that the organizations are keeping their eye on the ball, but they aren't militant. They work with CRNAs if they're anesthesiologists. If they're CRNAs, they work with anesthesiologists, and more or less everybody's happy. But that's not sexy, and it doesn't get clicks, and it doesn't get votes. What gets votes is extreme positions, like, hey, we think CRNAs, we think any anesthetic that's delivered without an anesthesiologist's supervision is, is dangerous. CRNAs have their own political, when I say political, I'm talking about anesthesia politics, not politics. Mm-hmm. They have their own views, some of which are very extreme. I've talked to CRNAs who say that, anesthesiologists shouldn't exist, and so what happens is it's the extreme outliers often make it into the committee structure and the board of directors of both organizations. So it's more of a governance problem. And because of that, they are distracted and not willing to consistently work together on the hard things that need to be worked on.
Well, it sounds like society as a whole.
I mean, in some way, it is a microcosm, yes.
Because, I always say the reason why we're so politically divided is if you don't vote in a primary, right?
Yeah. Yes.
You're getting the candidate that somebody else gives to you by the time you get to the general election. And as somebody who has run for the House of Representatives, you got to appeal to the base that's going to vote in the primary, which are usually the extremes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'm hearing you say is we've got a similar issue within both of our organizations.
Are you a resident or CRNA looking to transition into independent practice? The AANA and Beyond the Mask are here to help you thrive as your own boss. Introducing the 1099 CRNA Institute, taught by Beyond the Mask host Jeremy Stanley and Sharon Pierce. This comprehensive educational series provides detailed guidance on business structure, legal and tax implications, and financial management tailored specifically for 1099 CRNAs. Enroll now and earn valuable continuing education credits as you chart a new course in your rewarding career. Visit aana.com/1099 to learn more and take the first step toward your new future.
I think it's a governance problem, and just so, because I know I'm going to get hate mail on this comment too, is that to be clear, there are, on both organizations, people who are strategic, solution-focused, who want to work on these issues.
I believe we had this discussion before we started taping, didn't we?
That's right. But there's enough extremists within both organizations that make that really difficult. So that's the core issue as I see it. And I've been in, obviously, for those of you who don't know, I've been on the board of directors of the AANA. I was the CEO for 4 years. I had significant interaction with my colleagues and counterparts, I should say, I guess, at the ASA. And they're not that dissimilar in terms of their governance structures are different, but the outcomes are very similar.
From the level that you're at now in corporate anesthesia, that 15%, what does that really mean when the rubber hits the road? Do we have any kind of data on that yet? For instance, how many groups use that? Because everybody thinks it's just going to be CRNAs, but you just talked about QZ billing. That's going to hurt any group that does QZ billing, 15%.
Mm-hmm.
So how much does that look like, or how many groups? Do we have any idea?
There's some rough back of the napkin math that I've seen that I haven't done that's specifically for United Healthcare. So remember, Cigna's been doing this for 2.5 years. There was other commercial payers that have been doing this. So if we just looked at this exclusively from United Healthcare and take this with a big asterisk, because I didn't do this math, but call it $300 million to $400 million straight to their bottom line just for QZ billing. So that's a material amount. Now, we all know United Healthcare has not had a good year. And so they're definitely focused on how do they drive their margin, and this is low-hanging fruit for them, is going after both the QZ billing and some of the other things with the policy, including the physician modifiers, is going to result in a meaningful amount of what I would characterize as a cash grab. And the reason why they've done it on anesthesia, and anesthesia is positioned well to be victimized here because we're so fragmented, and so there is not a coherent response from both organizations working together. And United Healthcare knew that was going to happen. So they've been very strategic about it.
Wow. Curious what obviously we have a problem here that you've listed. I'm curious what your solution would be to it. What we as new residents can do, as new coming CRNAs can do, people who don't have as much political power can do. What's your solution here?
I think part of it is having awareness that this stuff, and I get a sense that the ASA and anesthesiologists are a little bit more acutely aware of the economic issues than maybe CRNAs.
You think?
Yeah, and so.
I mean, I don't mean to be ugly, but they know their worth. That's what we used to quantify the verbiage within our organization. Know your worth, and I think you've got a take on that. But I think they were better at that.
Before people start typing out their hate mail, I am definitely aware of the fact there are very smart, very engaged CRNAs who are very knowledgeable about reimbursement policy, politics, strategy, et cetera. But I would say if we zoomed out writ large, we're not as focused as I think we should be, because reimbursement is destiny. And so if you think about part of it is, and it sounds like just like a throwaway comment, is I think we do have to be more focused on educating our residents, SRNAs, on the economics of anesthesia. I think largely they've been kept immune to the consequences of this stuff. I think that's probably going to change. So, when I say kept immune, so if there's a significant decrease in reimbursement at a group or a practice, because there's a significant supply-demand imbalance of CRNAs, they're not going to cut CRNA salary. They can't. Now, what may happen in the future is that supply-demand balance will equilibrate because there's cycles, there always are, and you continue to see financial headwinds. There'll be a point in time where the hospital's probably losing interest in subsidizing that, and groups are going to potentially have to make some tough decisions. And that is down the road, not today, but in the future, I sense that will come because these things are cycles. So part of it is, I think we probably need to do a better job of educating, not just advocating. And then there is what organizations and constituencies can be doing on this a little bit more specifically. So the AANA and the ASA, I think, if they could say, hey, we're going to have a parking lot full of issues that we're not going to talk about and not get distracted on. Like, I don't give a shit about what you call yourself right now. Let's not talk about the stuff that is important to certain groups of individuals, but is not necessarily going to win the day on reimbursement issues. So we're going to agree not to talk about that stuff. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a task force, whatever you want to call it, on economic initiatives, and we're going to throw serious money behind it, and it's going to be a multi-front war. So think about public relations, think about litigation, think about legislation at the state national level, almost like a Manhattan Project-like initiative, which is typically scares boards, because boards don't like to spend money. They don't like to spend money on things they don't know the definitive outcome is going to be. And this is a thing where you're not going to know exactly how this is going to play out. But the opportunity cost for not doing it is so significant. Both organizations are sitting on top of enormous amount of money. So to be clear,
Yeah.
both organizations have a significant amount of money.
And have spent a significant amount of money.
And I would argue on some things that don't bring a lot of value. So that's the other thing, which is like prioritization. First, both organizations need to agree to do less in order to focus on this. And so it's not just money. There's operational bandwidth. I mean, there's only a finite amount of resources. So, what they need to probably do is sit in a room and say, hey, do we agree that this is an existential problem? Yes. Can we allocate significant resources to this? Yes. Can we develop a governance structure where we can work on this in a meaningful way and see what happens? And I think the risk here is if you don't do anything, you're guaranteed you're going to get screwed.
Yeah. How would you craft that campaign forward facing? Because the ASA's MO has always been to scare patients, right? And I've always said whenever they start talking safety, look for the dollar signs. Mm-hmm. Because that's what's behind that. But if we came together, what would that forward face look like? Because clearly we're talking about reimbursement, which affects us. That's not a patient.
That's where we get ourselves in trouble because we talk about ourselves too much.
Yeah.
So my hypothesis on this, and I said this as CEO, and people got pissed, and I do believe this with every fiber of my being. All of the stuff that we're doing around comparing our education to an anesthesiologist's education, to an AA's education, no one cares. Patients don't care.
Right.
Hospital execs don't care. Policymakers don't care. The infographics that we share on Facebook that make us feel good don't change behavior, doesn't change opinions, means nothing. So I think part of it is both organizations, understandably, are so focused on their internal constituents in a way that blinds them to what the real opportunity, which is like, this is actually a patient access problem. So if you pull the thread on this and say, okay, you look at what's happening to healthcare, particularly in rural and underserved communities. And then, you start to remove even more money from the equation. And so, again, 15% decrease in revenue is going to be borne by the hospitals that are least equipped to deal with it right now. And so then we start talking about shutting down OB units, start talking about closing down surgical lines that are potentially the lifeblood of the community, but don't generate a lot of margin for hospitals, that require CRNAs to be on call 24/7. That is a real patient care issue. And I think if we position this in the way that I think about it, which is, yes, this is an economic problem for groups for sure, but at the end of the day, this is a patient problem, patient access problem. And I do believe that. That's not just political talking points. I do believe this, plus what we're seeing on what's going to happen with Medicaid funding at the state level is a profound threat to the access to care for patients in rural and underserved communities. And I think that's how we position this in a meaningful way. less about us and how much money we make, and more about what are the second and third order financial consequences and access to care issues.
I like it.
Yeah.
But that
great.
would be your campaign right there.
I'd put $5 million behind that.
Yeah.
And so just from a public relations perspective, then you would look at something and say, all right, what I've seen so far, this is going to get me in trouble, but what I've seen so far from the AANA from a litigation perspective has been underwhelming. And so if we were really scared and concerned about the future of reimbursement for CRNAs, it would be more of a swarm litigation situation. So
okay, explain.
So, we've done a writ of mandamus.
Sure.
I'm obviously not a legal scholar, but ChatGTP tells me that's a low probability of being successful.
Right.
So,
but it can be a piss off maneuver or.
Yeah, it's not, the way that I understand it, and I am not a lawyer, and I'm sure lawyers who are listening to this are going to actively roll their eyes when I say it, but this is less of a legal strategy and more of a public relations strategy in terms of creating discomfort at both the agency level and with United Healthcare to say, we're so pissed off about this, we're going to sue the federal government. What I understand is that the likelihood that we're going to get a favorable result from this, from a legal perspective, is probably close to 0%. Now, that in conjunction with class action lawsuit, taking this to the state level in terms of legislation, and then looking for opportunities to sue people at the state level if these decisions, these policies are in any way in conflict with state law, now we're talking about something. So in terms of United Healthcare having to fight a multi-front war from a public relations, legislation, and litigation perspective. To be clear, this would cost an enormous amount of money.
And United has got plenty.
Hi, this is Jackie Rolls, President and founder of Our Hearts, Your Hands, a global support anesthesia community. We'd like to thank all of our prior donors and also say that we are accepting donations, welcome donations, to send a nurse anesthetist or even a nurse from a low-resource country to get further academic education or attend professional conferences or even equipment for some companies. Thank you so much for your support.
Yes, but they also have a threshold of discomfort in terms of public relations. So there'll be a point in time where they'll look at this and say, okay, juice is not worth the squeeze. This is creating a lot of friction for us. We're going to figure out another way to screw these people, but this one's not going to work. That's what's, that is actually the best case scenario. Now, the other thing, and this is be very expensive and very hard, but Ohio is a good case study here. So Ohio recently passed legislation that was signed that prohibits commercial payers from discriminating on reimbursement for non-physicians. So United Healthcare can't pursue this policy in Ohio. Now that's very expensive. They run at 40 states or 50 states at the same time to do that. But again, if we're talking about this as a multi-front war because we think this is existential to the profession, and existential is probably exaggeration, but we think it's deleterious enough that we should be focused on it. Some version of what I just said is what I would recommend. And I'm talking about tens of millions of dollars over 5 to 7 years that would be borne by both organizations, but at the end of the day, puts us in a much better position and gives us much greater leverage.
The hardest challenge is getting it started right now,
Yes.
getting them together.
Yes. Getting the Hatfield and McCoys to even have a conversation in a meaningful way. So, when I was at the AANA, to give you, and things may have warmed up a little bit, but my first president was Bruce Weiner, and Bruce wanted to start having conversations with the ASA. And I said, okay, let's see, let's do it. And I was naive. I was like, let's go. Yeah, I'll give Paul a call, and we're going to go have lunch. Yeah, and we actually did have, I think it was dinner, and we had some conversations, and then we wrote a paragraph. And the paragraph was to both organizations members and said, hey, it basically says, hey, we're talking.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about, some grand strategy.
No.
We're talking about, we just writing a paragraph to our members to say that we're now having conversations.
Yeah.
It took the ASA 5 months to get that paragraph through their leadership.
Wow.
So it was pretty clear to me, at least during my tenure, that the political environment in that organization just wasn't there. We were open to it. I think my boards were mostly ambivalent about it, but I was interested to see if we can find,
Some common
yeah,
ground.
like like a beachhead of conversation.
You know, there's a lot of history here, which
Oh, I bet.
Kevin may not be particularly aware of because you've just been looking for the vocal cords for a couple of years. You didn't, and that's important,
Of course,
because you want to learn how to maintain an airway. That's what you get paid for. But in 1937, the ASA presented a paper to the American College of Surgeons, said they wanted to rid the earth of these evil CRNAs. So, and we have come together in the past. It was during Terry Wick's years, and they hired an organization called ThoughtBridge to put both groups into a room to try and come up with common ground.
Yeah.
And both groups paid for ThoughtBridge,
Okay.
and the ASA walked out and left it entirely, because until we as association say that an anesthesiologist needs to be involved in every single anesthetic, and that was where everything broke down.
Yeah.
But maybe the time has come. I don't know what's going on at the ASA, but I challenge people to think all the time, this doesn't play out at the bedside ever.
Yeah, it's which is so frustrating because,
well, not ever.
I mean,
but
there's definitely examples where like
there's some acrimony, but
you know, across the anesthesia ecosystem, more often than not, if CRNAs and anesthesiologists are working together, it's pretty good.
Yes.
Yeah, and there are definitely examples where it's not. So don't send me hate mail on that comment. But I do definitely think that what is happening clinically is not being representative of what could happen strategically and politically at the organizations.
I agree.
Yeah. And I think both organizations, and this is going to get me in trouble, I think both organizations
you keep saying that.
Because you're already in trouble.
I know precisely who I'm going to hear from. And so, but I think, both.
Go ahead and tell them hello on the podcast now. Hey, I'm looking forward to your letter.
Yeah, I mean, well, part of it is, and I get it, is that because of my long tenure of leadership within the organization, there's like, well, you are giving the ASA a free pass on this, and to lump us in with the ASA, that this is false equivalency. And I was like, well, okay, I'm not sure that's how I positioned it, but at some point in time, someone's going to have to lift up and say, yeah, there are historical transgressions here.
Yes.
Both organizations have said and done things that, in retrospect, probably were not the right thing, me included. I mean, I was very.
Whenever you first came on the board, you were. I remember.
Yeah. So
I remember listening to your speech when you were campaigning to be on the board, and I'm like, God, I hope this kid doesn't win. What am I going to do when he gets on the board?
So but what I think might be helpful from my perspective is I've spent 4 years in corporate America.
Yeah.
And I have that perspective now, which is like, I'm a CRNA, I'm a proud CRNA, I'm unapologetically pro CRNA, but I work in an environment where I can see things, in terms of, I don't get caught into the organizational politics maybe that I was, involved in before, and I can see the wasted opportunity here. And that's frustrating because I do, if we zoomed out a little bit, what's happening now from a reimbursement perspective, I think we are underestimating the deleterious impact here.
Oh, absolutely. Well, even whenever I was president and I was being interviewed, I would always say, I'm not anti-anesthesiologist. I am just pro-CRNA.
Yeah.
I'm here to represent my profession.
As this stuff plays out, I'm probably half glass full. On this, and think that the probability that folks are going to be able to transform the way that they think and work together is on the lower end of probability. Yeah. So I guess I'm glass half empty. Sorry.
It's okay. We're in Nashville. We'll fill the glass
We'll fill
up.
that glass real quick.
We'll just go down to Broadway and we'll fill it all the way up.
Yeah.
So no worries. So kind of as we wrap this up, what would you like to leave our audience with?
Maybe I'll double down on a previous statement, which is thinking about just because you don't personally see the wolf at the front door doesn't mean that the wolf is not at the front door. And
I love that.
Things are good now for CRNAs.
Yes, they are.
There's a supply-demand imbalance out there. I don't know if you know this or not, but CRNAs are in huge demand. But I'm already seeing the data start to show that we're stabilizing, and that means, because it's a cycle, these are all cycles, we're going to be having a conversation about it leveling out at some point in time. And when that happens, the leverage CRNAs have relative to their compensation will change. And then compensation might be more aligned with what's happening on the reimbursement front. And I'd love to be in a position of strength when that happens versus a position of weakness.
Mm-hmm. All right, Kevin.
Yeah.
As a newbie looking in, what do you think about all of this conversation?
It's pretty crazy to see. It's interesting because, we talk about it being cyclic, and I've definitely talked to preceptors who have said, yeah, I had to kind of like fight for a job a little bit. Like, you don't just walk in with a heartbeat. You know what I'm saying? Like it sounds like, it is kind of like the stock market where things are good and then things are bad. And I think Randall is right in when we're at a position of things are good right now, we should be preparing for when you need a little extra oomph behind your profession in general.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, as always, this was a scintillating conversation with you, Randy, and I'm sure there'll be more. And just when you look down and you see my name on your phone, answer it, because when you write something else that's kind of controversial like this, I'll be calling.
All right. Look forward to it. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you for tuning in to Beyond the Mask. If you enjoy the show and want to help us grow, the best way to support us is simple. Leave a review on your favorite podcast platform, share the show on social media, and tell your friends. Your word of mouth is what keeps us going strong. We're proud to consistently rank in the top 50 medical podcasts nationwide and to be #1 in the CRNA community. All thanks to listeners like you. Your support helps us stay there, and we couldn't do it without you. We'll see you on the next Beyond the Mask.